This is the story of a father who spent decades building safety for others, only to discover that inside his own home, the greatest danger came from the son he trusted.
At 7:32 on a Friday evening, my son set down his fork at the walnut dining table I had built with my own hands and said, "You've been taking up space long enough, Dad. Aurelia needs the master suite. Move your things into the basement workshop, stay out of the way, or find somewhere else to live." I was 67 years old. I had spent 41 years inspecting elevator systems, crawling through machine rooms, shafts, and rooftops so other people could step into a steel box and trust it would stop where it was supposed to. I had paid for that house. I had rebuilt the kitchen. I had replaced the roof twice. My late wife, Mail, had designed the stained glass panel above the back door and planted the white peonies outside the dining room window. Yet my own son was looking at me across food I had cooked and speaking as though I were an aging tenant whose usefulness had expired. I did not shout. I did not remind him whose name was on the deed. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and said, "All right." He smiled because he thought I had surrendered. What he did not know was that an hour later, I would find a message on his unlocked phone that read, "Keep him thinking. He still has a say until we get the paperwork sorted. Aunt Aurelia has the master room, the rest gets easier." He also did not know I had $417,000 in a private savings account he had never heard about. By Saturday afternoon, I was standing on the balcony of a Ridge condominium in Pennsylvania's Laurel Highlands, looking down over miles of forest and realizing I could buy it outright and disappear from the life he thought he controlled. Then the paper trail got worse. My son had used an old power of attorney to change the beneficiary on a $265,000 life insurance policy from my grandson to himself. His fiancée tried to sell my late wife's keepsakes from my front lawn. Somebody created a fundraiser using my photograph and told strangers I was a broke pensioner about to lose my home. And when my future in-laws finally visited, my son introduced me as the maintenance man who stays downstairs. That was the moment I stopped wondering whether I was being too harsh. 11 days later, I signed away the house he had already promised to another family. On possession day, his future father-in-law arrived with a lawyer, expecting to discuss wedding plans tied to property my son never owned. Instead, a young couple was standing in the doorway holding the keys. Before I tell you how one dinner table insult turned into the collapse of every plan my son had built around my silence, tell me this in the comments. If your adult child ordered you out of your own bedroom, then secretly used your legal documents and your name for money, would you confront them immediately? Or would you quietly remove everything they thought they controlled? And if you enjoy stories about family betrayal, boundaries, consequences, and the moment a quiet parent finally stops surrendering, subscribe to the channel and stay until the end. Because my son thought the most dangerous thing I could do was become angry. He was wrong. The most dangerous thing I did was become clear. My name is Theron Winslow, and the first thing I remember about that Friday night is the grain of the walnut table beneath my fingertips. I built it in 1992, when my son Dashiell was 2 years old and Mail was pregnant with our daughter Rosamond. I had found the wood at a demolition salvage yard outside Pittsburgh, thick boards from an old courthouse annex, scratched, dark, and heavy enough that I needed a friend to help me load them. Mail loved the marks because she said, "Furniture should admit it had lived before you found it." For 34 years, birthdays, school projects, arguments, Christmas dinners, unpaid bills, and ordinary Tuesday breakfasts had happened around that table. I never imagined the ugliest sentence my son would ever say to me would land on the same wood. I had retired 2 years earlier after 41 years in elevator systems. I started as a union apprentice replacing relays and door operators in aging downtown buildings, then moved into inspection and safety compliance until I could walk into a machine room, listen for 10 seconds, and tell which bearing would fail first. The work was dirty, precise, and unforgiving. Elevators do not care about confidence. They care about whether the brake holds. By the time I retired, I had enough pension income to live comfortably, a small consulting practice that still sent me occasional checks, and savings I had built quietly, because Mail and I believed money should create choices, not applause. Mail died 6 years before that dinner. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. She had been a stained glass artist and taught evening classes at a community arts center, which meant our house was full of color, even on gray Pittsburgh mornings. She made the blue and amber transom above the kitchen door, a heron standing among reeds, and every winter afternoon the sun crossed through it and laid pieces of colored light over the floor. For the first year after she died, I would stop when those colors appeared because my body still expected her to walk into them. Dashiell was 36. Rosamund, 42, worked as a respiratory therapist north of the city. My son sold orthopedic devices to hospitals and could describe a routine sales week as though he were negotiating a merger. Aurelia Ventnor, his 32-year-old fiancée, handled public relations for luxury beauty brands and had grown up around money, polished events, and people who treated comfort as proof of success. Her father, Thatcher, owned a specialty food import business. Her mother, Lenora, moved comfortably through nonprofit boards and formal dinners. They moved into my house 9 months before that dinner, after Dashiell's apartment building was sold and Aurelia's lease ended. Just until spring, they said, so they could save for the wedding and a down payment. The house had been quiet since Mail died, and I mistook their noise for life returning. Soon the guest suite expanded into a second bedroom full of product samples. Dashiell's car displaced my truck from the garage, and household cards began covering subscriptions, deliveries, cleaning services, and expenses nobody discussed with me. Each request was small enough to ignore. Together, they taught both of them that my resources arrived automatically. That Friday, I cooked dinner because Dashiell had mentioned missing the beef and mushroom stew Mail used to make. I started at 3. I browned the meat, reduced the stock, baked rosemary rolls, and even put out the gray linen napkins she saved for guests. Rosamund was working a 12-hour shift and could not come. I remember feeling disappointed because the table looked too large for 3 people, but I told myself the dinner mattered anyway. Fathers are experts at manufacturing hope out of small ingredients. Dashiell and Aurelia arrived downstairs at 7:19. They had both been home for hours, but came to dinner dressed as though they were meeting someone important. Aurelia wore a cream blouse and gold earrings. Dashiell kept checking his phone. I served the stew. He ate 2 spoonfuls before looking toward the hallway. "Dad," he said, "we need to settle the room situation." I set down my glass. "What room situation?" Aurelia studied her plate. Dashiell leaned back. "The master suite. Aurelia needs more closet space, and Thatcher and Lenora will be staying here several times before the wedding. The guest suite isn't practical." "That is why it is called a guest suite," he exhaled. "Come on, my bedroom is not available." Aurelia looked up. "Theron, nobody is trying to erase you. We're talking about using the house efficiently. Then efficiently use the rooms that are not mine." Dashiell's jaw tightened. I saw the shift before he spoke. It was the same look he had as a teenager when reasonable requests stopped working, and he decided pressure was faster. "You've been taking up the biggest room by yourself for 6 years," he said. "You don't need it." I stared at him. "Your mother died in that room. That's exactly what I mean. You're living in a museum. Aurelia and I are trying to build something." Aurelia did not interrupt him. That told me enough. Dashiell leaned forward. "The basement workshop is finished. There's heat, a half bath, and the fold-out couch. Move your clothes down there for now. You can have your quiet. We can actually use the space upstairs." I felt my heartbeat become slow and heavy. "For now." He looked toward Aurelia, then back at me. "Dad, honestly, you've been freeloading on everyone's patience. Know your place. Give up the room, stay out of the way, or pack your things and find somewhere else." The word freeloading landed so absurdly that I almost believed I had heard it wrong. I looked around the room. The table I built, the wall I rewired in 2008, the hardwood I refinished after a pipe burst, the heron transom Mail made. My mortgage had been paid off 11 years earlier. Dashiell had contributed exactly $0 toward the purchase of the house and very little toward its current expenses. Aurelia lifted her water glass. She did not look shocked. She looked relieved that the difficult sentence had finally been delivered. I could have exploded. I could have recited every bill, every repair, every time I had covered Dashiell's rent in his 20s, the tuition I paid, the credit card balance I cleared before his 30th birthday. But I had spent a career around machinery, and machinery taught me that once a system shows you the failure point, arguing with it does not strengthen the structure. I folded my napkin twice and set it beside the plate. "All right," I said. Dashiell blinked. "All right, if that's how it is?" His shoulders relaxed. Aurelia looked down, hiding a small smile. They thought the conflict was over. I carried a pillow and blanket downstairs to the basement workshop. The room smelled faintly of machine oil, cedar shavings, and the old rubber mats I used when restoring antique elevator fixtures for a local museum. A narrow daybed sat beside shelves of tools. Mail's stained glass cutting table was still under a canvas dropcloth near the furnace room. I stood there with bedding in my arms and felt, for the first time, like a guest in the life I had paid to build. Dashiell's phone was on the workbench. He had left it there earlier while looking for an extension cord. The screen lit when a message arrived. No passcode. He had always claimed security was unnecessary, inside family. I should have turned it face down. Instead, I read the notification. A group chat called Ventnor Plan. The preview showed Dashiell's name in one sentence. "Keep him thinking he still is a say until we get the paperwork sorted." My hand went cold. I opened the thread. Most messages were between Dashiell, Aurelia, one of her cousins, and a college friend of his. There were jokes about my museum house, complaints that I refused to modernize, and a photograph of the master bedroom Aurelia had taken while I was out. Then I found the line that made the room feel smaller. Dashiell had written, "Aunt Aurelia has the master. The rest gets easier. He's already tired. Keep him comfortable enough that he doesn't start checking documents." Below it, someone replied, "Title, Dashiell. Working on it. Old Poa may help with some things. Don't push yet." I read the words 3 times. Then I placed the phone exactly where it had been. There are moments when anger is so large it becomes quiet. I sat on the edge of the daybed, elbows on my knees, and thought of Dashiell at 8, holding a flashlight while I repaired a leaking radiator valve. I thought of him at 19, crying in the driveway after Mail and I dropped him at college. I thought of the man upstairs who had just told me to know my place in my own home while privately discussing paperwork that might make the insult permanent. At 11:38, I called Fintan Royce. Fintan and I had known each other since 1987, when he was an electrical lineman and I was still working elevator modernization downtown. He had sat beside me in the hospital the night Mail died and had enough sense not to say she was in a better place. He answered on the second ring. "Theron, I need somewhere to go tomorrow." A pause. "How serious?" "Serious enough that I'm sleeping beside my furnace in my own house." Fintan muttered something impolite. Then he said, "Remember that ridge condo near Ligonier I told you about? The one your cousin's friend is selling? Still available. End unit. 2 bedrooms. Cash seller. I can pick you up at 8:30. I looked at the yellow workshop light reflecting off Mail's covered glass table. "How much?" $318,500. I thought of the private savings account Dashiell did not know existed. $417,000. Built from consulting work, overtime buyouts, and 30 years of saying no to things that looked impressive and yes to things that lasted. "Pick me up," I said. I ended the call and lay down on the daybed without undressing. Upstairs, footsteps crossed the master bedroom floor. My son thought I had lost a room. By morning, I was ready to decide whether I still needed the house. I woke at 5:06 without needing an alarm. The basement workshop was still dark except for the green status light on the furnace, and for a few seconds I had the disorienting feeling that I had fallen asleep on a job site. Then my shoulder touched the thin daybed mattress, I smelled machine oil, and the previous night returned all at once. The walnut table, Dashiell's voice, Aurelia's silence, the group chat, the phrase "Old Poa may help with some things." I sat up slowly and listened to the pipes tick inside the wall. A man who spends 4 decades inspecting systems learns that unusual noise deserves attention before it becomes failure. I made coffee upstairs while the house was quiet. Dashiell and Aurelia were sleeping in the master bedroom, which I had surrendered less than 8 hours earlier. I could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan above them. I stood at the counter and opened the banking app on my phone. The household card assigned to Dashiell had started as a temporary convenience 7 years earlier, after he lost a job and needed help bridging 2 months of expenses. Temporary had turned into groceries, fuel, subscriptions, dinners, wedding deposits, and dozens of charges I had stopped examining because examining them made me feel petty. I found the card ending in 8,613 and pressed deactivate. The bank asked me to confirm. I confirmed. A small message appeared. Supplementary card close, digital wallet access removed. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. The action was almost insultingly simple. Years of resentment, one thumbprint. At 8:11, Dashiell came into the kitchen wearing a gray sweatshirt and the calm expression of a man who believed the difficult conversation had already been won. He opened the refrigerator, frowned, and looked toward me. "There's no oat milk. There's regular milk. Aurelia can't drink regular. Then one of you should buy oat milk." He looked over his shoulder. "Dad, what? Can you just grab breakfast? She wants fruit, pastries, maybe those egg things from Cedar and Stone?" "No." The word stopped him more effectively than shouting would have. He slowly closed the refrigerator. "No, I'm going out." "Where? That is not something you need to manage." His mouth tightened. "You're still doing this?" "I have barely started." Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Fenton stood outside wearing a brown jacket and holding 2 paper cups. He looked past me into the hallway, saw Dashiell, then looked back at me. "Ready?" "Yes." Dashiell stepped closer. "Where are you two going?" Fintan handed me a coffee. "Field trip." "Dad, we need groceries." I opened the front door wider. "You have a car." Dashiell's expression shifted into the familiar mix of irritation and disbelief. He grabbed his keys from the side table and walked toward the driveway. Fenton and I had reached his truck when Dashiell shouted from beside his sedan. "What do you mean declined?" He had his phone pressed to his ear. His face changed as he listened. "No, run it again. It's the same card." Fenton climbed behind the wheel and glanced at me. "That yours?" "Was." Dashiell looked directly at me. I opened the passenger door. "Have a good morning." His voice sharpened. "Dad, did you cancel the card?" "Yes." "What the hell?" I got into the truck. Fenton pulled away before I had to answer. For the first 15 minutes, he said nothing. Pittsburgh slid past the windows in wet gray layers. Brick houses, bridges, hills, the Monongahela flashing between buildings whenever the road opened. Fenton drove the way he had always worked. Steady hands, no unnecessary movement. He had retired from line work at 63 after a shoulder injury, finally convinced him that electricity was not impressed by stubbornness. "You read his phone?" he asked eventually. "Yes." "Anything you regret knowing?" "Everything." "Good. That means it mattered." I looked out the window. He mentioned an old power of attorney. Fenton's eyes moved toward me, then back to the road. "You still have one with him?" "I signed one after Mail died. I was handling probate, insurance, taxes. Dashiell helped. I never revoked it. That seems important." "It does now." Fenton nodded once. "Then Condo first, lawyer second." The drive east toward the Laurel Highlands gradually pulled the city apart. Buildings thinned, hills grew taller, and the late summer trees formed dark walls along the road. I had lived in western Pennsylvania my entire life, but I had always treated the mountains as a place to pass through rather than somewhere a person could begin again. Mail loved them. She used to say cities teach you how loud your life is, but mountains show you how little of that noise is necessary. The condominium complex sat on a ridge outside Ligonier. 3 low stone and wood buildings stepped along the slope. The unit was on the top floor at the end, reached by an elevator that was newer than most of the ones I had inspected during my career. I checked the certificate automatically. Fenton noticed. "You're retired. Gravity isn't." The seller's agent, a woman named Marlowe Sennett, met us upstairs. She was direct, late 40s, practical shoes, no perfume, no sales speech. I liked her immediately. "The owner moved to Arizona after his wife died," she said. "He wants a clean cash transaction." Unit's been empty 4 months. The front door opened into a narrow hall, then a wide living room with windows across the far wall. The view stopped me. Forest rolled away in layers. Ridges dissolved into blue distance. A small town lay below, roofs clustered around a church steeple. The sky was so large it made my problems feel briefly embarrassed by themselves. I walked to the glass. Mail would have stood exactly there. Not because the unit was luxurious. It was not. Oak floors, stone fireplace, small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a balcony large enough for 4 chairs if nobody wanted to move around much. But the light was right. Mail used to judge houses by whether late afternoon light had somewhere beautiful to land. Marlowe continued behind me. List is $318,500. HOA is $425 monthly. Furniture negotiable. How quickly can the seller close? She paused. Cash? Yes. 10 days. Maybe 12 if title is clean. Finton gave me a look. I stepped onto the balcony. The air smelled like pine, warm stone, and rain somewhere beyond the ridge. I put both hands on the railing and thought about the master bedroom in Pittsburgh. Dashiell telling me I had taken up space too long. Aurelia measuring closets with her eyes. The group chat discussing paperwork. Then I thought about my savings. $417,000. Dashiell did not know about it because I had never believed my private consulting account belonged in family conversation. After retirement from inspection work, I spent almost 6 years reviewing modernization estimates for small building owners and helping condominium boards understand elevator bids. I saved most of the income. Mail had always wanted us to have what she called walk-away money. Not money for leaving a marriage, necessarily, but enough that no one could trap you inside a bad decision because you could not afford another one. She had died before we ever needed it. Standing on that balcony, I understood she had still given me the gift. I'll take it, I said. Marlowe blinked. You want to write an offer? Full price, cash, inspection for major defects only. Finton looked toward the ceiling. I knew bringing you here was going to be expensive. Marlowe smiled. We can draft it downstairs. We signed the preliminary papers at a small table in the building's library. My hand was steady. That surprised me. I had expected some grand emotional resistance to spending $318,500 in a morning. Instead, I felt the same thing I used to feel when a long inspection ended and every safety circuit finally tested clean. Relief. On the drive back, I called Alistair Quillen. Alistair had handled Mail's estate and several consulting contracts for me. He was 64, wore bow ties without irony, and had the irritating habit of answering difficult questions with better questions. I need to review everything, I told him. House, title, will, power of attorney, insurance, accounts. What happened? My son told me to move into my basement and mentioned paperwork I don't remember authorizing. Silence. Tomorrow at 9, Alistair said. Today. Another pause. 2:30. Thank you. When Finton dropped me home at 1:18, Aurelia's car was in the drive. Dashiell's was gone. I entered through the side door and found her in the kitchen wearing a silk robe, speaking into her phone about a launch dinner. She ended the call when she saw me. Where were you? Out. Dashiell says you canceled the card. Yes. That card pays household expenses. It paid $93 at a nail salon Tuesday. Her cheeks colored. That was client-facing grooming. I have survived 67 years without financing client-facing grooming. She stared at me. Then her voice softened. Theron, last night got heated. Dashiell should not have said some of what he said. Some, she crossed her arms. We are trying to make this arrangement work. No, you are trying to make the arrangement permanent. Her eyes sharpened. I knew immediately I had hit the truth. She recovered. I don't know what you mean. That is fine. I walked past her toward the basement. Where are you going? To get documents. The silence behind me changed. I did not turn around. At 2:30, I sat across from Alistair Quillen with the deed to my house, my current will, a copy of the old power of attorney, and the first clean evidence that Dashiell's plan had moved beyond cruel words. By 4 o'clock, we discovered the insurance policy. Alistair's office occupied the second floor of an old stone building in Shadyside, the kind of place with deep window ledges and radiators that clanked whenever the weather changed. He poured coffee into 2 plain ceramic cups, then spent the first 20 minutes asking questions I found irritating because they were exactly the questions a careful lawyer should ask. Was I safe in the house? Had Dashiell ever threatened physical harm? Did I intend to remove him immediately? Had Aurelia made any claim that I lacked capacity? Was I acting because of one argument or because I had evidence of a larger pattern? Each time I answered, Alistair wrote one line on a yellow pad and asked the next question. When I showed him a photograph of the group chat messages I had taken the previous night, his pen stopped. You copied these from his phone? Yes. Do not access it again. I wasn't planning to. Good. We use what you lawfully possess. We do not build your protection out of behavior that gives him a counter-argument. I leaned back. You always make revenge sound boring. Revenge is expensive. Documentation is cheaper. That was Alistair. He reviewed the deed first. I had purchased the Brookline house in February of 1989, 8 months before Mail and I married. Her name had never been added, not because I wanted to exclude her, but because the subject never mattered to either of us. We paid for renovations together. We raised children there. The house was ours in every emotional sense and mine in the title records. Alistair confirmed Dashiell had no ownership interest and no right to prevent a sale. He advised that any move involving occupants should be handled formally and with proper notice, but the decision itself was mine. Then came the power of attorney. I signed it 5 years earlier, 4 months after Mail died. Grief had turned paperwork into a language I could barely read. Dashiell stepped in, handled utility transfers, insurance notices, and several estate errands. At the time, I was grateful enough to sign wherever Alistair told me was appropriate. The document was broad but revocable. Dashiell had never been authorized to treat it as a permanent extension of my life. Revoke it, I said. Alistair looked at me. Effective immediately? Yes. I will prepare formal revocation notices to Dashiell, your bank, insurers, and any institution we know received the old document. We should also update your medical directive and financial contacts. Do it. He opened my will next. Under the existing document, my estate was divided equally between Dashiell and Rosamund, with a separate educational trust for Evren, Rosamund's 20-year-old son. That arrangement had been written when I still believed equal inheritance was the cleanest proof of equal love. What do you want now? Alistair asked. 55% to Evren, 35% to Rosamund, 10% to Dashiell, conditional on no unsuccessful contest. His eyebrows rose. That is a significant change. I know. Why Evren? Because he is building something. Evren studied industrial design at community college and spent weekends apprenticing at a motorcycle restoration shop in McKees Rocks. He was not perfect. He had tattoos I did not understand, music I considered an organized assault on hearing, and a habit of taking apart machines on surfaces not designed for parts. But he called. He showed up. When I needed the basement dehumidifier moved after a minor surgery, he arrived 40 minutes later without asking whether lunch was included. I wanted to give him a foundation, not a lifestyle. And Dashiell? Alistair asked. I do not want to disinherit him in anger. I want the document to reflect trust. That answer will matter if anyone ever questions your intent. He wrote it down. Then I remembered Finton's warning and asked about life insurance. The policy was 25 years old. I had bought it when Dashiell and Rosamund were young and updated the beneficiary several times. 2 years earlier, I had named Evren primary beneficiary because Rosamund was financially stable. Dashiell already stood to inherit under the will, and Evren was approaching adulthood. The policy's current death benefit was $265,000. Alistair suggested calling the insurer while I sat in his office. The representative verified my identity, placed me on hold, and returned with the kind of professional voice people use when the information is serious, but they are trained not to sound alarmed. Mr. Winslow, a beneficiary change was processed 7 months ago under power of attorney authority. The current primary beneficiary is Dashiell Winslow. My fingers tightened around the phone. Who requested it? The form was submitted by the authorized agent listed on the power of attorney document. Dashiell. Yes, sir. The office seemed to lose sound. 7 months earlier, Dashiell and Aurelia were already living in my house. I had been making dinner for them, paying the heating bill, lending him my truck when his car was serviced, listening to wedding plans. While that was happening, he had presented an old legal document and redirected $265,000 payable at my death. I asked the representative to flag the change as disputed and restore Evren once they received my signed correction and POA revocation. Alistair drafted the forms before I left. When the call ended, he did not say anything for a moment. Finally, he asked, "Do you want to involve law enforcement now?" I looked at the coffee in my cup. It had gone cold. Not yet. Theron, I need to know whether there is more. There is always more if you keep looking hard enough. That is not what I mean. I know. He took off his glasses. Then promise me you do not confront him alone if you discover anything that makes you feel unsafe. I promise. He opened my will again, and we spent another hour working through revisions, medical directives, and specific language around future authority. By the time I left, the condo offer was accepted. The will changes were being drafted. The insurance dispute was moving, and the old POA was effectively dead. Driving home, I felt a strange split inside myself. One part of me wanted Dashiell to walk into the kitchen, confess everything, and somehow become the boy I remembered. The other part was already calculating storage volume, sale timing, and which documents needed to leave the house before he knew what I was doing. Love was still present. Trust had become a separate question. I stopped at the bank before going home. The branch manager reviewed recent account access and confirmed no large transfers had occurred, but the old POA had been scanned into their system years earlier. She placed an alert requiring direct confirmation from me for any unusual transaction and removed Dashiell from every supplementary privilege connected to my accounts. The process took 32 minutes. 7 years of access vanished in half an hour. At 6:10, I turned onto my street and saw folding tables on my front lawn. For 1 second, I thought a neighbor was having a sale. Then I recognized my orange-handled inspection torque wrench lying beside a box of kitchenware. A hand-lettered sign leaned against my mailbox. Moving did a letter sale. Everything must go. Aurelia stood near the driveway wearing white trousers and sunglasses, talking to a woman who was holding one of Mail's stained glass lampshades up toward the sun. I parked at the curb and got out slowly. My tools were spread across the first table, a laser level I used for years, my father's brass calipers, the old door gauge set from my last inspection job. On the second table were mixing bowls, serving platters, picture frames, Mail's workshop aprons, and 2 small boxes of colored glass scraps she had sorted by shade. Then I saw the walnut chest. Mail made it in one of my woodworking classes as a joke, because she said I was the one in the family who should understand wood. She carved a tiny heron into the lid. Inside, she kept what she called things with no market value. Our first apartment key, Dashiell's hospital bracelet, Rosamund's first school photograph, 3 folded notes I wrote during our courtship, and a silver pendant from her mother. The chest had a price sticker on it, $25. I picked it up. Aurelia appeared beside me. "Theron is going to tell you." I turned. She smiled too quickly. "We're clearing space. The house is overflowing. And you never use most of this. This belongs to Mail." Her smile weakened. "I assumed sentimental things could be separated if you pointed them out. You priced her life at $25. That is not fair." I looked at the tables. "Did Dashiell approve this?" She hesitated. That was enough. From next door, Greta Norwood walked down her steps. Greta was 74, a retired librarian who had lived beside us for 23 years and considered property lines a weak suggestion. She approached the fence, saw the walnut chest in my arms, and her expression hardened. "Aurelia," she said. Aurelia turned. "Hi, Greta, that box was Mail's." "I know." "No, dear, if you knew it would not have a price tag." The woman holding the lampshade quietly placed it back on the table. Greta looked at me. "You need help carrying anything inside?" "No, thank you." She nodded. Then she turned to the small group browsing the tables. "These are not Aurelia's things to sell." People began setting objects down. Aurelia's face flushed. "Greta, please stay out of this." Greta smiled with the calm of someone who had spent decades telling teenagers to lower their voices in libraries. I have been staying out of it for months. Apparently, that was generous enough. I carried the walnut chest inside. Then I returned with 2 storage bins and removed Mail's belongings, my tools, and anything whose ownership could possibly be disputed. I did not yell. I did not tip tables. I did not create a neighborhood spectacle. The spectacle ended on its own when nothing worth buying remained. At 7:02, Dashiell came home. He looked at the half-empty tables and then at me standing in the driveway with Mail's chest. "What happened?" I studied my son. "Ask your fiancé." Then I carried the chest downstairs, set it beside my packed legal documents, and locked the workshop door for the first time since I had owned the house. The next morning, Aurelia knocked gently. Her apology would cost $1,260. Aurelia knocked at 9:14 the next morning. 3 soft taps, evenly spaced. I was sitting at Mail's old cutting table in the basement workshop, sorting documents into a fireproof case. Deed copy, insurance correction, POA revocation, condo purchase agreement will draft. The walnut keepsake chest sat within reach. I had removed the $25 sticker, but the pale rectangle where it had been remained on the lid like a bruise. I opened the door. Aurelia stood in the hallway wearing a pale blue dress and an expression that had been carefully assembled. Her eyes were slightly red, though whether from regret, embarrassment, or lack of sleep I could not tell. "Theron, can we talk?" "Talk. I was wrong yesterday. I waited. I should never have put Mail's things outside without asking. I genuinely thought I was helping clear clutter before the wedding, but that does not make it okay. That was a better apology than I expected. Not perfect. Still centered on intention. But at least the word wrong had appeared without being dragged into the room. "Thank you," I said. She looked almost disappointed by how little the apology changed my face. "I want to make it up to you. You do not have to. I do. There is a private wellness club downtown. Massage, sauna, lunch. I booked us both for this afternoon. My treat." I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me knew immediately that the gesture had another layer. Another part was curious enough to see it. "Your treat?" "Yes." "All right." The club occupied 3 floors of a restored bank building near Market Square. Marble, quiet lighting, thick robes, staff who spoke softly enough to make ordinary sentences sound expensive. Aurelia knew half the employees by name. For nearly 3 hours we occupied the strange neutral territory created by steam rooms, massage tables, and cucumber water. I will not lie, the massage helped. The daybed had been punishing my lower back, and for 45 minutes I forgot about Dashiell, insurance paperwork, and the house. Afterward, we sat in a lounge overlooking downtown. Aurelia talked about the wedding venue, then caught herself. "Sorry, you are still getting married." "I know. It just feels weird discussing it with you right now." "Then do not discuss it." She smiled faintly. A staff member placed a leather folder on the table and walked away. Aurelia opened it, glanced at the total, and slid it toward me. $1,260. I looked at the number, then at her. "You said this was your treat." She blinked. "I meant I arranged it." "No, you said my treat. I thought since you had a good time, and because the house card is not working, you could just cover it this once." There it was. Even the apology had arrived attached to my wallet. I closed the folder and pushed it back. "No." Her cheeks colored instantly. "Theron, do not do this here. I am not doing anything. People can hear you. I am speaking normally." She leaned closer. "This is humiliating." "Yes." She stared at me. I stood. "You invited me. You said you were paying. I accepted your invitation. If you cannot cover the bill, call Dashiell or your father." "You are unbelievable." "No. I am simply no longer paying automatically." I changed clothes and waited outside. Aurelia emerged 13 minutes later, furious and silent. She had paid with a personal credit card. The drive home lasted 38 minutes without one word between us. When we pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed. Marlo Sennett had sent a message. "Ridge condo title cleared. Closing confirmed for next Friday." Below it was another message. "House listing photos ready. Can go live when you authorize." I looked at Aurelia's white knuckles on the steering wheel. "Authorize," I typed. The house appeared online the following afternoon at $519,000. Marlowe had photographed it while Dashiell and Aurelia were at work, under my written authorization. Seeing my home on a listing page produced an emotion I had not expected. The rooms looked larger when stripped of memory. The walnut table became custom dining furniture negotiable. Mail's blue heron transom became artisan architectural glass. The basement workshop became finished flex space, a life translated into sales language. 3 showings were booked by morning. Dashiell still knew nothing. That Friday, he texted me at 1:06. Thatcher and Lenora coming at 5. Please make sure the house looks presentable. Aurelia wants dinner in the dining room. I read the message twice. Then I looked around the immaculate kitchen I had cleaned every week for almost 3 decades. I replied with one word. No, he called immediately. I did not answer. At 5, I was in the backyard adjusting a loose hinge on the storage shed when 2 cars arrived. Aurelia came out first, then Dashiell, dressed in a navy blazer that fit him too tightly across the shoulders. Thatcher Ventnor stepped from a black sedan. He was 63, broad, silver-haired, and less theatrical than I expected. Lenora followed in a cream coat. She looked at Mail's peonies and said, sincerely, "These must be beautiful in spring." I liked her for that sentence. They entered the house while I washed my hands at the utility sink. By the time I walked into the living room, Dashiell was speaking too quickly about the neighborhood, commute times, and what we're thinking of doing with the place after the wedding. After the wedding. Thatcher looked around. It has good bones. It does, I said. Dashiell's eyes flicked toward me. Aurelia introduced us. Thatcher shook my hand with a firm grip and asked what I did before retirement. Before I could answer, Dashiell laughed lightly. Theron's basically the maintenance guy around here now. He stays downstairs and keeps the old systems running. The sentence hit harder than freeloading. Not because maintenance work embarrassed me. Maintenance is honest. But my son had removed the word father, erased the ownership, and reduced 41 years of technical work to a role he thought would sound suitably small in front of a wealthy man. Thatcher looked from him to me. Maintenance? I spent 41 years in elevator systems and safety inspection, I said. I bought this house in 1989. Most of what you see has been renovated by me or people I hired. Dashiell laughed again too quickly. Dad likes to be precise. From the open front door came Greta Norwood's voice. He also owns it. Everyone turned. Greta stood on the porch holding a covered casserole dish. She had apparently come to return a baking pan I loaned her months earlier and had arrived at exactly the wrong or right time. Dashiell's face tightened. Greta, we're having a family dinner. So I see. She stepped inside and handed me the dish. Then she looked at Thatcher. Theron bought this place before those two were old enough to spell mortgage. He rebuilt half the mechanical systems, took care of his wife here, raised both his children here, and has fixed more things on this street for free than most people would charge for. If anyone told you he is the maintenance man, they skipped an important word. Thatcher raised an eyebrow. Which word? Owner? The room became very quiet. Greta nodded at me, turned, and left. Lenora looked down. Aurelia stared at Dashiell. Thatcher's expression changed from polite interest to careful assessment. Is the house yours? He asked Dashiell. Dashiell swallowed. Eventually. I mean family property. Dad's getting older. We have plans. I asked if it is yours. No. Thatcher's mouth tightened. I had spent months imagining Aurelia's father as the source of all her entitlement. Standing there, I realized wealth had not made him stupid. Dinner was uncomfortable but civil. Thatcher asked me about elevator code changes. Lenora asked about Mel's stained glass. Dashiell barely ate. Aurelia drank 2 glasses of wine quickly. After they left, Dashiell cornered me in the kitchen. You embarrassed me. I answered a question. You could have gone along for one evening. With being your maintenance man? You know what I meant. Yes, that is the problem. His hand struck the counter, not hard enough to damage it, but hard enough to make the silverware jump in a drawer. You are sabotaging my marriage. No, your lies are simply reaching people before you can manage them. His face went still. I walked downstairs before the argument became something else. At 9:22, my grandson Evren called. "Grandpa, Dad called me." "What did he want?" "He asked whether I knew how much money you had. Savings, investments, anything." I told him no. I sat on the daybed. "Anything else?" "He asked whether Mom knew about your life insurance." My hand tightened around the phone. Evren continued. "Something felt wrong. I figured you should know. You did the right thing. Are you okay?" I looked at the locked fireproof case beside Mail's walnut chest. "I'm becoming okay." The next morning, the first offer on the house arrived. $526,000, financed, 20-day close. Marlowe advised waiting. By Monday, a second offer arrived. $519,000, all cash, 11-day close. A young civil engineer and his wife, a pediatric nurse with a 7-month-old daughter. I asked Marlowe to send me their letter. They wrote about the kitchen light, the backyard, and wanting a house where their daughter could grow up near grandparents. At the bottom, the wife had written one sentence by hand. "The blue glass bird above the door made me feel like someone loved this house before US." I read it twice. Then I told Marlowe to prepare the acceptance. Before I could sign, another betrayal arrived. This one used my face. The call came at 8:06 on Tuesday morning from a woman named Pauline Drescher, who lived 3 streets away and knew Mail from the Arts Center. I had not spoken to Pauline in years, but I recognized her voice after she introduced herself. She sounded embarrassed, as though she were calling because she had discovered something private and wished she could put it back where she found it. "Theron, I hope this is not intrusive, but are you in financial trouble?" "No." She hesitated. "There is a fundraiser online using your photograph." My stomach tightened. "What does it say?" "That you lost most of your retirement after a pension dispute, that your health is declining, that you may lose the family home and need help with medical and housing costs." I closed my eyes. "How much has it raised?" $3,740 when I looked. "Who created it?" "The organizer name is D. Winslow." There are betrayals that arrive like a blow. This one felt different. Cold, deliberate, administrative. Somebody had selected a photograph of me, written a fictional version of my life, created a payment channel, and invited strangers to feel sorry enough for me to send money. It was not only theft, it was identity stripped down and repackaged as a sales pitch. "Thank you for calling me," I said. "I almost donated." "I'm glad you called instead." After we hung up, I found the page within 2 minutes. The photograph showed me carrying a toolbox from my truck, shoulders bent slightly forward. It had probably been taken from the front porch. The title read, "Help a Reddered Pittsburgh tradesman keep his home." The description was worse. It said I had spent his life serving others, which was close enough to truth to make the lies around it believable. It claimed an employer pension restructuring had left Theron with almost nothing. It said my adult children were doing everything they can, and that without community help, I could be displaced from the home where I cared for my late wife. Doing everything they can. That sentence nearly made me laugh. I took screenshots of the page, donation total, organizer name, photograph, and comments from people offering prayers and small amounts of money. Then I reported the campaign as unauthorized and fraudulent and forwarded everything to Alistair. His reply came 7 minutes later. "Do not confront Dashiell. Preserve everything. Call me at 10. Greta came through my back door while I was making another coffee. She held her phone in front of her like evidence. "Tell me you have seen this." "I have. People from St. Mark's have donated." "I know. Theron. They are stealing from people using your grief." I looked at the blue heron glass above the kitchen door. Morning sun had started moving through the amber reeds. "I know." She sat across from me. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing today." Greta stared. "Nothing. The campaign has been reported. Alistair has the evidence. The house sale is moving. The insurance is corrected. The POA is revoked. If I confront Dashiell now, all I do is tell him exactly how much I know." Her eyes narrowed. "You have become frighteningly patient. Mail used to call it stubbornness with paperwork." Greta's expression softened at the name. "She also used to say once you made a final decision, moving a bridge was easier than moving you." She was frequently rude. She was frequently correct. The fundraiser disappeared that afternoon. The platform emailed me that donations would be frozen pending investigation and contributors notified. I did not know whether Dashiell removed it himself or the platform did. Either way, the page was gone. The screenshots were not. At 10:51 that night, Dashiell knocked on the basement door. I had been expecting the apology long before it arrived. People who sense control slipping often reach for tenderness after pressure stops working. He stood in the doorway in jeans and a t-shirt, no shoes, his hair uncombed. Without the work clothes, confidence, and Aurelia nearby, he looked younger. "Can I come in?" "Yes." He sat on the edge of the daybed. I remained by Mail's cutting table. "Dad, I owe you an apology." "All right. The dinner was wrong. Calling you a freeloader was disgusting. I was trying to prove something to Aurelia, and I took everything out on you. I listened. I know I have relied on you. Too much. I know the room thing was disrespectful. Her family has expectations. I felt like I had to show them I could provide something real. A house?" He looked down. "A future." Using mine, his jaw tightened, but he kept his voice soft. "I want us to fix this." I studied him. The apology had all the correct pieces. Context without fully naming blame. Soft voice. Eye contact at intervals. The appearance of vulnerability. A year earlier, I would have accepted it before he finished. This time I asked one question. "When did the fundraiser come down?" Dashiell's face froze. "What?" "The page using my photograph. The one telling strangers I lost my pension and might lose this house. When did it come down?" His eyes shifted once toward the locked fireproof case. "I don't know what you're talking about." There it was. Not shame. Calculation. I felt something inside me finally release him from the role of misunderstood son. "Dashiell, I know about the beneficiary change." The color left his face, I continued. "I know you used the old power of attorney. I know you asked Everin about my savings. I know about the group chat. I know about the fundraiser. I know Aurelia put Mail's things on the lawn. I know you have been speaking about this house as though ownership is waiting for me to disappear." He stood. "Dad, that is not. I am not angry." That stopped him. "I wish I were." Anger negotiates. Anger wants an apology, an explanation, a different ending. I am past that. His face twisted. "What does that mean?" "It means I am finished structuring my life around what keeps you comfortable." "Dad, please." His voice cracked. For 1 second, I saw the boy who once waited outside an operating room with me when Mael had surgery. The boy who called from college because his first roommate hated him and he thought the entire year was ruined. My chest hurt with love that had nowhere useful to go. "Good night, Dashiell. What are you doing?" "You will know soon." He stared at me for several seconds, then left. I locked the door after him. The next morning, I accepted the cash offer on the house. $519,000, 11-day close, no financing contingency. Marlowe sent the contract electronically. I signed at 7:44 a.m. from the basement workshop where my son had sent me to sleep. At 8:12, I called Everin. "Can you bring your truck Saturday?" "Sure." "What are we moving?" "My life." He paused. "Okay, 8. He arrived 5 minutes early in an old dark green pickup with one mismatched door and a motorcycle helmet rolling around behind the seat. Everin had Mail's gray eyes, though his hair was longer than she would have tolerated. He wore work boots and a faded shop shirt, with the name of the motorcycle restoration business across the back. "Where do we start?" I opened the basement door. We started with the walnut chest. Everin lifted it carefully. "Grandma?" "Yes." He placed it on the passenger floorboard, not in the bed. That small decision nearly undid me. We spent 6 hours sorting what mattered from what merely existed. Mail's glass tools, my father's calipers, family photographs, records. 2 chairs I wanted. Books. The blueprints from my first major elevator modernization. Clothes. Everything else would either stay with the house, be donated, or move later through professionals. At noon we ate sandwiches on the tailgate. Everin looked toward the house. "Dad is watching from the upstairs window." "I know." He took another bite. "Does he know you are moving?" "No." Everin was quiet. Then he said, "I think you should have done something like this sooner." I looked at him. "That bluntness genetic? Probably. You might be right." "I am," I laughed. On our second trip to the storage unit, Evren asked where the boxes would eventually go. Ligonier. His eyebrows rose. You bought a place? Yes. Does Dad know? No. He smiled slightly. Good for you, Grandpa. There was no greed in the question, no follow-up about price, no curiosity about inheritance, only approval that I had somewhere to go. We were unloading the last boxes when my phone buzzed. Marlowe. Final title clear. Closing Monday, 9 o'clock a.m. 11 days after my son told me to leave my own bedroom, the house had a buyer, and Dashiell still believed the future depended on whether I forgave him. Closing morning arrived with rain. Pittsburgh rain, thin and persistent, the kind that turns brick dark and makes every traffic light reflect twice on the pavement. I woke at 5:18 in the basement workshop and lay still for a moment listening to water move through the downspouts. 11 days earlier, I had been sent to that room as punishment for refusing to surrender my bedroom. Now the daybed, the furnace, and Mail's covered glass table felt less like exile and more like the command center from which I had quietly dismantled the arrangement upstairs. I dressed carefully, dark trousers, white shirt, navy jacket. Mail had bought the jacket for our 25th anniversary dinner and complained that I owned too many clothes designed to survive machine rooms. I had worn it only twice since she died. That morning I put it on because some days deserve the version of yourself that stands straighter. Fintus arrived at 8:20. He looked at me once and nodded. You clean up suspiciously well. I have paperwork. Dangerous occasion. We drove downtown without discussing Dashiell. The title office overlooked the river from a modern glass building. Marlowe Sennett was already there with the buyers, Kieran and Noelle Stroud. Kieran was 33, a civil engineer who worked on bridge rehabilitation projects. Noelle was 31, a pediatric nurse. Their daughter, Maeve, slept against Noelle's chest in a carrier, one tiny hand curled against her mother's coat. Kieran shook my hand. Mr. Winslow, thank you for accepting our offer. You paid what I asked. Noelle smiled. We would have paid more if we had to. Never tell the seller that before closing. She laughed. The closing officer reviewed each document slowly. Sale agreement, tax adjustments, transfer statements, title certification. I signed my name more than 20 times. Each signature removed another legal thread between me and the house. The process should have felt like erasure. Instead, it felt like releasing pressure from a system that had been operating beyond design limits. When the final documents were executed, the closing officer confirmed the wire proceeds would be deposited by afternoon. $519,000, less ordinary fees and adjustments. 37 years of ownership translated into a number on a page. Noelle touched the folder containing the keys. I hope this does not sound strange, but I promise we will take care of the glass bird. My throat tightened. Mail made it. The woman in the blue heron photo? I nodded. Noelle smiled softly. Then it stays. That mattered more than the price. Finton and I ate lunch afterward at a small diner near the Strip District. He ordered meatloaf. I ordered soup. For 40 minutes we talked about baseball, his niece's new baby, and whether the elevator in the title building had excessive door dwell time. You inspected it, he said. Observed. You are retired. So is the word observed. By the time we finished, the house proceeds were in my account. I went home at 5:42. Dashiell was on the living room sofa with a laptop open. Aurelia sat in Mail's chair, scrolling through her phone. They both looked up when I entered. I placed a folder on the walnut table. Come sit down. Something in my voice reached them. Dashiell closed the laptop. Aurelia set her phone face down. They sat together across from me at the same table where the story had started. I sold the house, I said. For 2 seconds, neither moved. Dashiell blinked. What? I sold the house. Closing was this morning. The buyers take possession in 11 days. Aurelia stood so quickly her chair struck the wall. No, I looked at her. No, you cannot do that. We live here. You live here because I allowed it. Dashiell's face was changing rapidly now, confusion turning to anger, then fear. You sold it without telling me? Yes, I grew up here. Yes, Mom lived here, yes. This is my home. I opened the folder and slid a deed copy toward him. This house was purchased in my name before your mother and I married. You have never owned any portion of it. He stared at the document. You cannot just decide we have 11 days. I already did. Alistair has prepared formal written instructions concerning move out, property pickup, and any questions you want your own attorney to review. Aurelia's hands were shaking. What about the wedding? What about it? My parents think. She stopped. I watched the truth catch up with her sentence. What do your parents think? Dashiell stood. Dad, stop. I looked at him. What did you tell them? He began pacing. Nothing that matters. It appears to matter to her. Aurelia turned on him. You told my father Theron was transferring the house after the wedding. Dashiell's face went white. There it was. Another plan I had not known existed. You promised them my house, I asked. I said it would stay in the family. You said it would be ours, Aurelia snapped. Dashiell shouted, because I thought it would. I stayed seated. He looked at me, breathing hard. This is because of one dinner. No. The card? No. You are punishing me. I opened the folder again. No, Dashiell. I am responding to information. I placed the insurance correction confirmation on the table. The beneficiary change. His eyes dropped. Then the screenshots from the group chat. The paperwork plan. Then the fundraiser screenshots. The story you sold about me to strangers. Then the POA revocation. The authority you no longer have. Then a copy of the new estate plan acknowledgement. And the future you assumed would automatically become yours. Aurelia slowly sat down. Dashiell stared at the papers. You changed the will? Yes. To what? That is private. His mouth opened. I leaned forward. Notice what you just asked me. Not whether I still love you. Not whether we can recover. You asked how much you get. His face collapsed. That is not what I meant. It is exactly what you said. Aurelia began crying quietly. You are destroying our lives, she whispered. I looked at her. No, you made plans using things you did not own. Reality is not destruction just because it arrives after the deposits are paid. Dashiell struck the table with his palm. Enough. The walnut shook. I stood. He froze. I was still his father. Still 6 feet tall. Still the man who had worked with steel and motors for 41 years. But the authority in the room no longer came from size. Do not hit my table. His hand lifted away. I stepped closer. You called me a freeloader in this house. You told Thatcher I was maintenance. You changed my insurance beneficiary while eating my food and sleeping under my roof. You used my photograph to collect money from strangers. Then you promised this property to another family as though my death were a paperwork delay. His eyes filled. Dad. No. My voice stayed low. You do not get to call the consequence cruelty because you liked the arrangement better before I understood it. The room went silent. Aurelia wiped her face. Where are you going? She asked. I thought of the ridge balcony. Somewhere you did not know existed. Dashiell looked at me sharply. You bought another place? I smiled without pleasure. Yes. With what money? That question finished whatever remained to say. I gathered the folder. 11 days. Treat the house respectfully. Coordinate questions through Alistair. Then I walked downstairs. The next morning, Rosamond called. Dashiell had reached her before sunrise. She listened to my version without interrupting, then apologized. Not for missing the dinner, because she had been working, but for spending years dismissing Dashiell's behavior as something I would always handle. I should have asked more, she said. You had your own life. You are my father. Those are not opposites. That sentence stayed with me. 3 days later, Dashiell texted that they had found a rental townhouse outside Dormont, he added. Do not expect a goodbye. I wrote, understood. They moved out on the 9th day. No goodbye. Aurelia took her event boxes. Dashiell carried the last suitcase down the porch steps without looking at me. He paused at the sidewalk, perhaps waiting for me to stop him. I did not. On possession morning, Kieran and Noelle arrived at 9 o'clock with Maeve asleep in a carrier. I handed them the keys at the front door. It is yours. Noelle looked around the entryway and smiled through nervous tears. Then a black SUV stopped at the curb. Thatcher Ventnor got out with Lenora and a man carrying a leather briefcase. Aurelia's father looked at Kieran holding the keys, then at me. Theron, he said carefully, what is going on? I sold the house. His jaw tightened. To him, to Kieran and Noelle Stroud. The man with the briefcase glanced at Thatcher. Thatcher looked toward the street. "What did Dashiell tell you?" I asked. "That the property was part of the marriage plan. That title transfer was expected after the wedding." I nodded once. He was mistaken. Aurelia's car turned the corner then. She stopped when she saw her parents. Dashiell was in the passenger seat. They got out slowly. Thatcher turned toward his daughter. "Aurelia, we need to talk." Dashiell looked at me, then at Kieran, then at the keys. The future he had been describing to everyone else was standing in another man's hand. I put my final suitcase into Finton's truck. As we pulled away, my phone rang. "Dashiell," I answered after 2 rings. "Dad." His voice sounded raw. "Thatcher is pulling the wedding support. Aurelia says she needs space. Vendors are calling. I do not know what to do." I looked through the windshield at the road climbing east. "I am sorry. Can you help me?" The old reflex moved inside me, then I let it pass. "No." A long silence. "Not right now." I heard him breathe. "Okay. Take care of yourself, Dashiell. That is your job now." I ended the call. Behind us, Pittsburgh disappeared one hill at a time. Ahead, the Laurel Highlands rose into the afternoon light. 3 months later, I had a routine. I woke at 5:40, made coffee in a kitchen that had never held a single argument from my old life, and carried the mug onto the balcony while the ridge below was still dark. On clear mornings, the lights of small towns blinked through the valleys like scattered embers. On foggy mornings, the whole world disappeared beyond the railing, and I sat inside a cloud with nothing to look at except the nearest pines. I had spent most of my adult life believing home was the place where history accumulated. The Ridge condo taught me home could also be the place where history finally stopped dictating the furniture. The unit was not large. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a stone fireplace, and just enough storage to force choices. Mayle's walnut chest went in the 2nd bedroom, her stained glass tools near the window, and 40 tubes of old elevator drawings became 6. I donated the rest to an apprenticeship program and kept 1 battered notebook because Finton insisted his old wiring mistakes had historical value. Twice a week, I volunteered with a nonprofit that modified homes for older and disabled residents. Grab bars, railings, widened doors, stairlift evaluations, basic safety work. Nothing glamorous, exactly my kind of work. The first time a homeowner thanked me for showing up, I realized how long it had been since I had done something useful without wondering whether usefulness was the price of belonging. Finton came every Saturday. We sat on the balcony, argued about baseball, and ate whatever I cooked. He never asked when I planned to speak to Dashiell again. That restraint was one reason I trusted him. Rosamund visited in October with Evren. She took the 2nd bedroom. Evren insisted on sleeping on the living room sofa because the windows faced the valley, and, according to him, "You paid for the view, Grandpa. Somebody should use it at night." On Sunday morning, we ate eggs on the balcony wrapped in jackets while the sun climbed over the ridge. Rosamund looked around and said, "Mom would have loved this." I looked at the light spilling across the floor. "Yes." Then she said, "She also would have been furious you waited so long." "That sounds more like her." We laughed. Dashiell did not call for 7 weeks after possession day. I heard pieces through Rosamund, though I never asked her to report. Aurelia ended the engagement within 2 weeks. Thatcher recovered part of the unused wedding deposits and refused to finance anything further. Dashiell moved into a studio apartment in Greenfield and kept his job at the medical device company for another month before resigning after missing a major sales target and arguing with his manager. The old version of me would have heard that sequence as an alarm. Rent, employment, heartbreak, son in trouble, fix something. I fixed nothing. In November, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter in a white envelope. My address written slowly enough that I recognized effort in the spacing. "Dad, I am not writing to ask for money, the house, the will, or forgiveness. I am writing because I finally understand that every time I said you were controlling, what I meant was that your money had stopped doing what I wanted. I changed the insurance because I thought I deserved the future anyway. I made the fundraiser because I was short on wedding deposits and convinced myself I would take it down before anyone noticed. I told Thatcher the house would be mine, Because I was ashamed to admit I had built nothing that looked like stability without you. I am in therapy. I am working as a facilities coordinator for a senior living company. Entry level. The pay is less. I have a roommate. I cook badly. I am not asking you to answer. I just wanted to tell the truth somewhere it could not change halfway through the sentence. Dashiell. I read it twice, then placed it on the kitchen counter. Finton found me looking at it the next morning. Good letter? Painful letter. Those are sometimes the good ones. I did not respond that week, or the next. I had spent years answering too quickly whenever Dashiell needed something. I wanted my first response to the changed man, if he was changing, to come from choice rather than reflex. Evren visited alone just before Christmas. He drove up in the same battered pickup and carried a box of pierogi Rosamund had made, plus root beer, because he remembered I had stopped drinking years earlier. We ate on the balcony until the cold forced us inside. He asked the question directly. Do you forgive Dad? I held my cup in both hands. Yes. Evren looked surprised already. Forgiveness and access are different things. He waited. I forgave him because I do not want to carry the ugliest version of him around forever. But trust does not regenerate because I become tired of being angry. Trust needs evidence. Like inspections. I smiled. Exactly like inspections. You do not certify the elevator because the mechanic says sorry. You test the brake. Evren nodded. That is annoyingly logical. It is why your mother avoids arguing with me before coffee. A week later, I wrote Dashiell back. I received your letter. I believe you are beginning to understand what happened. Keep doing the work. I love you. I am not ready to return to the old relationship, and I never want that old relationship back. If we build something new, it will be slowly and honestly. Dad, he replied 3 days later. Understood. Thank you for answering. No request followed. That mattered. By spring, Dashiell and I were having coffee once a month in neutral places. Diners, hotel cafes, a bakery near his apartment. I did not invite him to the condo immediately. He did not ask. The first few meetings were awkward enough that we discussed weather, work, and sports like distant relatives trapped at a wedding. Gradually, he began speaking about therapy, debt, and shame without turning every confession into a plea for rescue. One afternoon, he said, I spent years thinking you were keeping me from becoming independent. I stirred my coffee. I was. He looked up. I was also keeping you from failing often enough to learn. He absorbed that. So we both messed up. Yes, but do not confuse my enabling with your decisions. I did not make you change that beneficiary. I know. I did not make you lie to Thatcher. I know. I did not make you use my picture for money. I know. He nodded. I need you to keep saying that when I try to turn explanation into excuse. That was the first time I believed he might actually become someone different. I updated my estate plan one final time that summer. The distribution remained 55% to Evren, 35% to Rosamund, and 10% to Dashiell under the conditions Alistair had drafted. I did not change it because Dashiell began behaving better. An inheritance is not a reward chart. The plan reflected how I wanted the resources of my life to move after I was gone. More importantly, every authority document was clear, limited, and reviewed annually. I learned late that love should never depend on legal ambiguity. There is a lesson in this story that has nothing to do with selling houses or changing wills. For too many years, I confused love with surrender. I said yes because no created tension. I paid because watching my son struggle made me feel like I had failed. I allowed small disrespect because confronting it seemed more exhausting than absorbing it. Each decision looked generous by itself. Together they taught Dashiell that my boundaries were temporary obstacles he could outlast. Kindness without boundaries can become training for entitlement. That does not mean you cut people off the first time they disappoint you. Families are messy. Adult children fail. Parents overhelp. Partners become selfish. People say things they regret, but patterns matter. Secret financial changes matter. Using someone's name for money matters. Treating another person's home like an inheritance waiting for a funeral matters. When those things appear, love does not require blindness. If you are helping someone you care about, make the help visible. Put terms in writing. Define what temporary means. Review old powers of attorney, beneficiary forms, shared cards, and permissions before a crisis teaches you why they matter. If you lend money, decide whether it is truly a gift or truly a loan. Do not call it one while expecting the other. And if you are the person receiving help, remember this: access is not ownership. A parent's savings are not an early inheritance. A spare bedroom is not a deed. A forgiving person is not a person without limits. I used to believe the worst thing that happened to me was hearing my son call me a freeloader at the table I built. It was not. The worst thing was realizing I had made that sentence possible by surrendering small pieces of authority for years. The best thing was discovering I could stop. Tonight, as I finish telling you this, the sun is dropping behind the ridge. Orange light is crossing the living room floor and touching the walnut chest Mail made. The mountains are turning blue one layer at a time. Somewhere down in Pittsburgh, my son is learning how to live a life his father is not financing. Somewhere across town, Rosamund is finishing another hospital shift. Evren is probably taking apart a motorcycle engine on a bench somebody specifically told him not to use. And I am home, not because I escaped my family, because I finally stopped confusing being needed with being owned. So let me ask you, if you were in my place, at what point would you have drawn the line? At the dinner table, the group chat, the insurance change, the fundraiser, or would you have waited for one more apology? Tell me in the comments, and tell me what city or country you are watching from. I genuinely like seeing how far these stories travel. If you believe family should come with honesty, gratitude, boundaries, and consequences when those boundaries are crossed, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next story. Share this with someone who may be giving too much simply because saying no feels cruel. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Protect your peace. Protect your documents. Protect the part of your life that is yours to decide. And remember, forgiveness can open a door. Trust decides how far it opens.